Hey everybody, it's John Ray with Jade Protocol, NF Treasure, and Smarter Coin, joined, of course, with the crypto teacher du jour, Kyren Cater. We're going to be talking about tokenomics today. And when we are analyzing the marketplace, obviously one of the things that we need to break down to the nitty-gritty details are: what are the tokenomics? Are they sustainable? Are they creating the right supply-demand equilibrium? And is there a flavor of tokenomics that is better suited in certain environments? So we're going to dive into that. We've got a big document that Kyren's prepared for us. So we're going to take it step by step and probably break this into a few different videos. But tokenomics, once we can all lock in this concept, not only will we understand better why the tokenomics of NF Treasure and Jade Protocol are set up the way that they are, but really crypto as a macro is just a giant laboratory in tokenomics experiments. And so whether you're going out to build your own project or looking for the projects that match your investment risk curve or risk tolerance, this video is going to give you everything that you need to know to properly assess projects. So Kyren, hey, what do you got for us?
John. Hello. It's great to be back. Thanks for joining us for a new episode, everyone. Okay, so John's done a great introduction as always. Today's tokenomics. So very, very exciting as a part of what I do on my own channel. This is pretty much the bee's knees and what pretty much sort of investigating what projects are. This is like the baseline for it. So very exciting topics today. But as in our usual fashion, I want to start off with a definition on what tokenomics is. We'll break that down slightly, and then we'll move into some examples, whether that's this video, next video, we'll have to see. So what defines tokenomics? So tokenomics is the blend between two different terms, so token and economics. Now, tokenomics describes every attribute that appeals to the economic characteristics of a token or coin, including the token distribution, vesting schedule, utility, supply, governance, inflation or deflationary model, so on and so forth. But they're sort of the main characteristics of what tokenomics stands for.
And I just want to remind people, because I think sometimes when we read a definition, it can trigger people to kind of glaze over and not actually pay attention. It reminds us of being back in school and not wanting to be there. The reason that we want to always start from the definition is that anytime we read a definition and start to glaze over it, it's almost always because there is a word or set of words or a phrase in that definition that we didn't quite understand. And so our brain just kind of pushes it away. And so the reason we start with the definition is because if we can actually understand at a deep level each word in the definition, we're going to get the entire concept. And really, this video is going to be breaking down every single word: token distribution, vesting schedule, utility, supply, governance, inflationary or deflationary. If these aren't terms that are on your checklist as you're going through a project, then you have a blind spot that you may not even be aware of.
Yeah, perfect. Like, it does remind me a lot of sometimes being in school or hearing something. When you're unfamiliar with a term, it pretty much invalidates the whole sentence or paragraph. I do agree. Maybe like if it does confuse you, watch the video, come back to that first statement and just see if you can understand it better.
I think, and by all means, if something doesn't make sense, leave a comment and ask us about it, and we'll unpack it further. We're getting better and better at finding the language to explain these things in a way that makes sense and so that people can easily get it. And Kyren and I are going to both approach it from different angles. So not to ruin the whole flow of the video before we dive into tokenomics, but I really want to drive home why it's important to understand the definition for each of these things.
Definitely, I agree. Okay, well, let's dive into the start and breaking the statement down. So first of all, let's go into what is the difference between a coin and a token very, very quickly, because most people do understand the difference and it's very subtle. So coins and cryptocurrency generally refer to a standalone independent blockchain like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano, for example. And there's a whole other sort of list of cryptocurrencies that are on the edge. Pretty much, they're more or less a payment token, and we're going to get to that in a second. But technically, you can refer to all of them as tokens, but most definitely there is that little difference. Okay, so
yeah, and maybe another way to say it is it's the native token of the network, and oftentimes it's the token that gas is paid in.
Correct. That's a great example. Yes. So that's Ethereum, for example. That's a perfect one. And I've also got down here, they're more or less a store of value. So as Jon said as well, you pay gas fees in them. People tend to hold them because it means something to the network. You can pay, the ecosystem with that token, stake, and all that sort of things like that. So what I like to tell people is, especially like friends and family, if they're trying to get into the space, I say think of a coin as like the US currency, for example. Like it's in a specific region, location, and it's used by pretty much everyone in that location as sort of the base currency.
Yeah, I love that. The blockchain is like a nation state. Usually the blockchain has its own constitution, and then the native token, or I'm sorry, the native coin, and let me not confuse it, the native coin that you're paying the gas fees with is kind of the denominating currency of that ecosystem or nation state.
That's right. And on the contrary, tokens are pretty much for the projects that operate on that coin or that ecosystem. And they more or less, they denote most of their sort of value from the underlying coin itself, because obviously if the underlying coin isn't worth anything, the projects aren't really going to be worth anything because there's nothing there holding up the project. So the way I again go and describe that to people that I know is look at tokens as if you went to corporations or businesses, and businesses had in that sort of that nation their own sort of currency. Let's just say, we had a Crypto Visionary token that was in the US. That would obviously, the US currency would obviously be the underlying asset there. And people can come to us and pay for services that we have in a Crypto Visionary token, So, the bigger the corporation in my eyes, which is the bigger the project, the more kind of weight that token has in the ecosystem.
That's right. And so that's why a lot of people become maximalists for their particular network, and only want to invest in projects that are on certain networks, because if they believe that the underlying value that supports that network is shaky, they're not going to want to get into a project that sits on that underlying coin. And so in true Smarter Coin fashion, we've completely confused the issue, because Smarter Coin is actually a token, and it's backed by AVAX, which is the native coin for the Avalanche network. And as we know, for anybody that's DCAing into Smarter Coin right now, as the Avalanche network has gains traction, and that traction shows up as price action, that is directly relational to how interested people are in Smarter Coin, and basically the calculations that go into figuring out what Smarter Coin is actually worth versus the native token.
Yeah. And I always tell people to look at the L1 first, look at the underlying blockchain or the coin first, and then go and research projects on the ecosystem, because, it's the most important thing. You don't want to be buying something that's bad to begin with before you even go looking on the native network. So,
it seems like semantics, but the reason that it's important is less about whether you call it a coin or a token, and more about recognizing that there is a base level currency for every single blockchain, and then the projects are built on, and the value is usually denominated by that. So the main liquidity pool for Smarter is the Smarter AVAX pool. AVAX is the native coin, and so knowing what the native coin is and how well that coin is going to do can basically give you an eye for the type of momentum you might expect for the tokens that are built on top of that.
Yeah. If anyone is still confused, look at any project on Ethereum or AVAX, And you'll notice that if you go to CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, they're always paired with the underlying blockchain. Like for example, in Smarter, it's only paired with AVAX. It's not paired with USDT, for example, at the moment. So that tells me that the underlying blockchain is AVAX straight away without doing any more research.
Yeah.
So you can use AVAX to purchase. But John, let's move into the comparison now between the different tokens, because there is actually a difference. So you have coins, nice and simple, very easy to understand. Then you have tokens, and there's a different branch of tokens. And we're seeing the different branch of tokens become more prevalent as the ecosystem is developing, because I'm going to show you why in a second. Regulation is pretty much the number one reason here. So give me a second, guys. I'm going to try to pull up a document on my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. So this is the comparison table of different types of tokens. So one of the most common ones is utility tokens. Their main feature is to provide access to platform services where they reside. So they've got some examples here, not too familiar one, apart from basic attention token. I don't really know any other those other tokens at the moment, but this is pretty much more or less most tokens. They classify themselves as utility, and some of the tokens we'll be looking at either in this video or the next video will fall under utility tokens. So make sure you watch that part of the video to understand that further. But what I was referring to a second ago with regulation is these ones here called security tokens. So the uses and issuance governed by a financial regulation. So because crypto currently for the most part is unregulated, we're kind of a bit of a standstill with what we can actually, well, at least what projects can produce or not produce. And there's a very fine line between if they could possibly fall under regulation in the future, if they do something now, will it have a future consequence? So security tokens will be designed and are sort of being designed in a way that the token can pretty much be built around a way that they know we're going to be regulated. So for example, the SEC, which is sort of the Securities Exchange Commission of the US, a lot of you should be hopefully familiar with who they are. They regulate sort of equity markets and all that sort of thing. And they've been coming into crypto kind of recently and looking at some projects going, you need to be regulated, you need to be regulated, you need to be regulated. And that has a really bad effect on that project. It tends to kind of plummet the token or at least hold it in its tracks. And a prime example of this is XRP. So anyone that is in the space, at least for around about a year now, should know that that XRP is under investigation by these guys. And if they had simply known about a security token, or at least we had a framework for what is a security token and what isn't a security token, they could have gone on and started off being a security token, and then hopefully had all the sort of characteristics of what to be regulated for and what not to be. If that makes a bit of sense, John, I'm not too sure if you can clarify that a bit better than me.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back into utility token. So utility token is basically the token that is used within a particular protocol. So there's not much use case outside of it. So Jade is the token that we denominate in within Jade protocol. Treasure is the token that is used to play the treasure box game within the NF Treasure ecosystem, but they don't have a lot of value other than being able to be swapped for other tokens outside of that. So the token that allows you to actually do something in the protocol. So with Jade, you get to vote with it. Sometimes there are drops or added rewards for people who are holding it. So that's part of the utility there. Holding a Jade token allows you to create a proposal. It allows you access to the financial reports. So that's a utility token. By holding it, you're getting utility in the ecosystem. But it doesn't really do much outside of that. You need to swap it for something else outside of that particular protocol or ecosystem. Security tokens are basically things that are set up in a way where they would fall under some kind of regulatory guidance. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of regulatory guidance, and because we have these invisible lines drawn all over the earth with different regulatory bodies in between each of those sets of lines, this is a really blurry area right now of crypto. And so one of the things that a lot of people are looking for is forced clarity on what actually designates a security token and what are the rules governing it, so that, like you said, a company like XRP or anyone can make sure that they are setting up their entity in a way that matches the proper regulatory governing bodies.
Yes. And we're going to go into security tokens at the start of the tokenomics research. That's the number one thing I like to look for right off the rip, because I have a little bit of not a story, but I want to give you a prime example of why a project not already knowing it is a security and then finding out later is extremely damaging to the overall project and the USP.
Yeah.
So,
and remember, the reason to know these terms is because as you're researching projects, you need to be able to put a checkbox next to what it is so that you can understand what all of the potential probabilities for that project are, which makes you a more educated or intelligent investor and actually reduces the risk or puts you into a risk curve or risk tolerance level that matches your financial goals and portfolio, because you're just more aware of what the actual project is and what the potential risks are for each of these categories.
yeah, I'm at the moment trying to still work on a little test I'm creating for like the Learn to Earn course that we can tack on, and it will give you guys like I think it's about 17 or 18 questions you can hit yes or no on that will help you identify whether a project is what you think it is or not. But that's for a different sort of video. Now, let's just finish up here. So we've got payment tokens, and as Jon and I touched on before, this is more or less like your coins, so Monero, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. So anything used for paying goods and services inside and even outside of their platforms. And as they say here, almost every crypto falls in this category. Okay. We have exchange tokens, more or less is exactly what the name says it is. So exchange tokens are native to crypto exchange platforms like Crow, for example, BNB token, anything like that, FTX token. And then we have non-fungible tokens, and this is everyone knows and loves. Well, that's debatable. NFTs. So non-fungible tokens are cryptocurrencies with limited issuance that have unique identities and tokens that make them hard to copy or replicate. So right off the rip, just a general fungible token, there's many thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions. Non-fungible means there's only one or multiple in existence.
Right. And so just to give a few thoughts on that. So payment tokens, obviously just about anything, because you can swap almost anything for anything else as long as there's a liquidity pool or a market maker in place. However, the payment tokens are often the native coin that basically you would use as your denomination to then buy tokens in the ecosystem. Exchange tokens, one thing that I'll add to that is that you can usually expect these to have much higher liquidity, especially if it's a centralized exchange. Because there's often a market maker partner that is coming in and providing a massive amount of liquidity, because they're making a bet on that ecosystem or that exchange, and they're kind of owning either side of the order book and making a profit there. And so that's how exchanges make money, is by providing that liquidity. And then I think it is interesting to see NFT written out as non-fungible token, because I think a lot of people forget that at its core, an NFT is not a profile pic. It is a token. And what makes it non-fungible is that with a Bitcoin, I could buy 0.1 Bitcoin, or I could buy 0.001 Bitcoin. That is Bitcoin being fungible. But non-fungible, I can't split my chicken or my Bored Ape into pieces, even though there are projects that are providing unique ways to kind of create a derivative layer on NFTs and split them up so that you can invest as a group or buy a portion of an NFT. But by design, a token itself without some kind of derivative built on top of it cannot be split into two. And that's why NFTs are interesting, is because it's housing that intellectual property as one thing that can never be split apart.
Yeah, and this also goes just beyond what a lot of people are familiar with, and that's, like you said, the profile pictures or some of the more mainstream options. Matter of fact, non-fungible tokens are actually being used now to provide, collateral or lending in some of these protocols like Centrifuge, for example, where you can take out loans backed by an NFT that is then in turn, derived from your real life asset, car, house, whatever that may be. It's actually pretty crazy. So there is a lot more utility behind that than what you think there is. So I think John, that pretty much covers the initial statement of what I wanted to, between tokens and economics. The video is perfect. I think we're about 20 minutes into the video now. So I guess everyone stay tuned for the next part. Jon and I are going to go into what I find to the most 6 sort of fundamental points of researching tokenomics.
Yep.
And what do you have to...
And I'll just say that it can feel somewhat boring or mentally taxing to have to revisit some of these concepts, but the more clarity you have on what each of these elementary things are, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, we both are to some extent, because we've got some brilliant people in our ecosystem, and we're attracting more and more subscribers all the time. But every time I go back to the basics and remember, oh, that's right, it's non-fungible token. As an innovator and as a visionary, it allows me to think about the space in a new way. And when you're analyzing what the next project is going to be, the next thing that actually has the potential to grow some legs and actually do something, you need to be thinking about it from this base level framework where you're actually trying to figure out, where does this project fit in to the ground laying puzzle pieces that are going to long term, over the next 5 to 10 years, allow this ecosystem to thrive? And if something doesn't fit into one of those core categories in an interesting, new, or provocative way, then maybe it's not the right project to get into. So I just wanted to reiterate that I know that it's sometimes boring to go over these categories and revisit things that we think we already know. But the value in it is that the more knowledge we get in the marketplace, when we then revisit these elementary terms, it connects differently. The synaptics in our brain connect on it differently. And then we're able to have a vision that we may not have had earlier on in the markets. So the intention of this is just to make sure that we all are seeing all probabilities in a project, where they fit into the macro whole, and that will make us hopefully more intelligent and seasoned investors.
And we're going to get into a lot more complicated stuff in the future. So for anyone that does want to, that already is hearing this and does itching away and wants to hear some more complicated things, Jon and I will be getting into that most definitely later, and into the Learn to Own course as well. So I'm super excited for that, Jon. I think we can get some good content out there. We got 12, 18 months to get everyone up to standard. So I think that's good.
All right. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.